Laptops get hot and overheat, and that is a fact of life that everyone has to deal with, no matter how much laptop companies try to convince us that they solved all thermal issues with every single new generation. So that's why Razer introduced the Razer cooling pad, meant to help keep your laptop cool and thus performing better for a longer period of time. But does it actually do that? Well, kind of. Okay, so first off, what even is it and how does it work? Basically, it is just a raised laptop stand, which also has a giant fan underneath it. It comes with 3 different special plates that you put underneath your laptop depending on its size, with this thing being able to support up to 18-inch laptops. On top of choosing the right frame, you also need to select the correct setting for this little stopper at the bottom, and once everything is set up, you can start plugging it all in. First off, it is going to require power straight from the wall, and then you can also connect it up to your laptop via this USB Type-A cable. Though to make up for that loss of a Type-A port, it does actually give you 3 additional Type-A ports at the back, though granted they are all just Gen 2. On the right hand side, you see 3 additional buttons, all of which you can change to your heart's desire in Razer Synapse later, but by default, they handle the power on and off, the speed settings, as well as the RGB effects, because yes, of course it has RGB, it is a Razer product. I hate saying it, though I kind of love the way it looks. However, your mileage will vary depending on how reflective the surface you place the cooling pad on is. And speaking of, I kind of just like the design of the whole thing as well. It's going into this kind of weird nostalgic futuristic thing at the back with the kind of design, and by the way, that area also hides a dust filter, so you don't have to worry about that. Once you do turn it on, you have 6 different fan speeds. 3 of them are fixed RPM, but then the other 3 use smart curves that directly read the CPU's temperature to adjust the fan speed accordingly, so it's slower and thus quieter when it can be, and ramps up when it has to, which leads to the obvious question of, why would anyone ever use the fixed RPM modes? Well, just in case they don't work, which unfortunately they have a tendency of doing that, and it's a well-known bug that both I and many people on the internet have already run into. Either way, for the purposes of this video, we'll be mostly sticking to the smart curve modes because those are ones that make the most sense, and of course you can adjust them to your heart's desire in Razer Synapse. So now for the big question of, does it actually work? Well, what do you think is going to happen when you stick a giant fan under your laptop? Especially if you have a thin and light like mine, which are infamous for getting more hot because, well, obviously they don't have as much cooling. The difference can be fairly noticeable, both in more synthetic benchmarks like for example in Cinebench, but also of course in gaming as well. We're going from temperatures that are at thermal throttling or getting dangerously near to thermal throttling to something more acceptable. But that leads to an obvious question, so what? So what if it runs cooler? Does it actually affect anything about the performance? Well, if your laptop gets that close to thermal throttling as often like mine, then it totally can make a difference. Sure, it won't be a night and day one, but just look at the difference in the Cinebench scores. Or if you want actual real world performance numbers, just look at the difference in games like Rainbow Six Siege as an example of an esports title, or Cyberpunk 2077 if you want a more single-player cinematic experience. So no, it's not going to breathe new life into a laptop that's going to be struggling to run these games anyway. However, again, it does help very much with thermal throttling to ensure that you have a nice consistent experience, and it does give you a few extra FPS. However, as you probably noticed, there are rather diminishing returns if you go for those faster presets, which is especially important given how, while in quiet, it is pretty tolerable. By the time you get to the balance of performance 1, this thing gets loud, which is to be expected given how the fan has a maximum RPM of 3200. Unless you just don't mind a noise because you're already deaf, your laptop is just overheating that much, or you're just obsessively trying to shave off every single degree, then it's probably not worth it to go into those faster and louder presets, because again, it's not gonna be worth it, and even just at a quiet preset, it is going to be a big difference. I mean, let's take a productivity benchmark like Puget Bench's DaVinci Resolve test and compare the quiet setting and just a bare bones setup. Though of course those kind of benchmarks mostly just look at the performance when it comes to exporting. Though of course the place where you're gonna notice slightly better performance than most is going to be in overall timeline playback, where again, if you're able to prevent your CPU from thermal throttling, you are going to feel that advantage straight away. Is it going to turn some old overheating laptop into a modern gaming machine? No. Is it going to make your setup quieter? Also no. But as long as it can keep your laptop from thermal throttling and thus quickly losing performance, then it pretty much accomplishes its mission. Are those things going to be worth the asking price of $170 though, even if it is on sale at the time of me making this video? Well, obviously that's going to be a tough call. That is a lot of money, so you really have to consider how much you need something like that in your setup. At least things like the additional Type A ports do add to the value proposition a bit, and at the end of the day, it is still just a laptop stand, with all of the ergonomics and comfortability it brings with it. And surprisingly, the experience of typing on it, even while I was resting on a special foam lining, is still pretty decent. Plus, if you own a Razer blade, you actually get additional functionality out of it, because you'll be also able to directly talk to the CPU and GPU and adjust the performance when calculated with the benefits of this additional cooling. So that's also something to keep in mind. But still, like I said, at $170, it's going to be a tough call. But if you decide to buy it, then hey, great. Our links to it will be down in the video description below, alongside our Patreon, because even a single $1 a month truly goes a long way. Plus, huge thanks to Gavin Burns, Justin Rage, Ella Vroniak, Balash Foka, Another Pseudonym, Meg Sumner, Shane Allcroft, and Mason Magruder. But anyway, that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then remember to subscribe, like, whatever, and I'll see you all in whatever I make next. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.